this episode of the Naturist Living Show, renting water parks.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bare Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bareoaks.ca.
Welcome, dear listener, to episode 129 of the Naturist Living Show. My name is Stéphane Deschênes. I'm your host for this podcast and the owner of Bare Oaks Family Naturist Park. This episode is brought to you by the very kind and generous support of Hubert, Andrew, Hanch, Barry, and John S., because we probably have more than one John. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for keeping the show going. We are starting to have a fairly decent amount of money, which is making it very worthwhile for Samantha to keep things going. And I'm sure you've noticed that there are more episodes now because we're able to turn these out faster because I don't have to do all the work and it doesn't just depend on the free time that I have. So if you're not already supporting us, please visit patreon.com/Naturist Living Show, one word. And today we are talking about water parks, or variations, big ones, small ones. It started with Tim Chismar, who you've heard many times now, our intrepid West Coast reporter, telling me about how he had had a conversation with Corky Stanton about how they had gone pretty far in renting a water park in California. And I hadn't heard of that. And the reason I hadn't heard much of it, although it made quite a bit of news at the time, is that it didn't happen. It almost happened. They signed a contract, as you'll hear, and they got pretty far. So let's get started with that story.
It's me, it's him, it's TIM, back again for the Naturist Living podcast. On the show today, we are interviewing Corky Stanton, the man, the myth, the legend behind CFI and closefree.com. He had an amazing idea to do a nudist event at a water park, and when Stéphane Deschênes, our illustrious host and producer, found out about it, he said, Tim, we got to get all the information. We got to get the details. How dare this be a nudist event that is not covered or uncovered by the Naturist Living podcast? So we've got the guy on the phone. I love him to death. Worked with him forever. Corky, hey, thanks for joining us, brother.
Oh, thank you, Tim. It's nice to be here.
All right, man. So give us a little background. Where did the idea come from? Where was it at? How did this happen or almost happen? And I know it wasn't yesterday.
Right. It's history. It's back in 2004. Seems like yesterday to me, though. Anyway, it's near my house, about 45 minutes away, actually. And I was there just visiting the park as a tourist, sliding down the slides, floating around in the pools, and I was thinking, if only this was closed free, it'd be so much better. Going down those slides without having to worry about, your shorts getting all tight. And I mentioned it to one of the people that worked there, and they said, "Oh, they've been to nudist resorts before, and they've talked about it, and they love that idea too." And I said, "Well, I happen to own closefree.com, and we would love to have an event here. Maybe I could, talk to your management." And they said, "Yes, definitely do it. I will let them know." And so another friend of mine who's a member joined me. I'm not sure if he wants me to use his name, so I won't at the moment. And he joined me, and we met with him. And they were excited about the idea. And they said that I could rent the water park for a weekend after they closed for the season, which would be in September. And it was around May at the time in 2004. And so I did a little survey online on our website, who's interested in coming to California and have a weekend at a beautiful water park. And so many people would say they would buy the tickets. They'd love to be there. And so, bottom line, we signed a contract, open-ended contract, where either party could back out, for most any reason. And we started to sell the tickets online. And we did not want to talk to the press yet because we didn't want it to cause any bad publicity for them. We wanted it to be a quiet event, which was um, not the way it turned out. So anyway, we started selling the tickets online, and immediately people started buying them like crazy. I mean, from really far, actually from all over the world, even Japan and Australia. People said they would fly to California so they could be part of this event. And then I decided, this could be like the largest nudist event in history if it keeps on going after 3 more months of selling tickets. Anyway, somehow it got to the press. Well, actually, because I'm online and someone's going to read it, and it got to I think it was CBS in Fresno, and they immediately did a #1 story about it. I didn't know it was going to happen, and they went and said nudists are going to be at the water park, and it was like #1 story. All of a sudden, everyone's calling me, and then the orders started coming in, a whole bunch from Fresno, of people signing up for it that have never been part of it. And of course, I had a lot of rules about who can sign up, and they have to agree to all the, um, you know, the ways to behave and so on.
Well, was there any vetting through like Anna or Naturist Society or
Yeah.
any group? Yeah.
Well, I recommended that they be part of AANR or our club or the Nature Society, or agree to all these terms, and we were going to hire security to really, enforce all the behavior. So it was a experiment, actually, also. And we were getting our feet wet with this whole new idea, and it was just blowing up, which means it could happen again, of course, if we did it right. And anyway, so if you go to the website closetree.com, just click on the blog at the top where it says blog and click history. You can read all about it right there. And there's also video clips of the news doing the news stories.
Well, let me ask you a couple of the questions, because you lived it, so some of the stuff that's common knowledge to you isn't to everybody else. For starters, what was the park?
Oh, Wild Water Adventures.
Is it still going?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and then what about the financial risk? As far as renting it, did you have to put any money down?
No, but they wanted me to give them half of the profits if I do all the promotions.
Gotcha. That sounds reasonable, as far as they're not out any money, except for
Right.
the cost of water, but they're expecting to make a nice profit. It sounds good.
Right. And we were saying if we don't sell enough tickets, we'll just have to cancel the event and give refunds. But it was looking like it was going to easily happen, because we were selling the tickets like crazy.
Now, did they give, when you spoke to the owners or the management, did they ever discuss what they said they would do if there was a negative outcry, or did nobody even consider that?
Yes. Yeah, they said they could cancel for any reason, like if they get negative publicity, and they don't want to do it after all. And they also did a complete background check on us and watched a bunch of our shows, and they saw that we're very wholesome and that it was family nudism, and we were allowing people under 18 also, as long as they're with their parents. And it was also clothing optional, uh, which means clothed people could come because we wanted to not feel pressured, and so, that's why we had security.
Interesting, because that's always a big debate amongst nudist folks: the whole clothing optional versus fully
Exactly.
nudist. Because you don't want gawkers. You don't want people just to show up to watch the naked people.
Yeah, but the thing that happened though, they did that number one story, and then my phone was ringing off the hook because the number was on the website, and then the next day, ABC and NBC and the Fresno Bee and other news organizations were all calling us, and I told them everything I could, because it was, everything was out, and by that night, the next day, it was number one story again on CBS and also the other channels. It was number one story on every one of them, and I had friends of mine record all the stations, and I still have all those. And those are on our website. You can watch the headlines and what they said about the news story.
Well, you would think this would make the water park very excited. All the publicity.
Oh yeah, they were instantly loving it. But then some of the news agencies were trying to find people that didn't like it. So what they did, they went to churches and they said, "How do you feel about Girls Gone Wild type event at Wild Water Adventures?" And that was their exact wording, and that was done by ABC News, which made me really mad because there was nothing at all like Girls Gone Wild.
Right. That's not how it's advertised at all. Yeah.
And then I looked at the ABC News website, and it said the same thing: Girls Gone Wild type event at Wild Adventures. So I called them and I said, "You're going to be sued big time for lying about what this event is." And they had it down within about 5 minutes off their website. And then they had a poll asking the public, if they would be happy with, this event is there. And almost everyone said no. That's because it said Girls Gone Wild. Okay. And then they redid the poll and they said a family nudist event, which is the words I told them to use. And then it was around 78% or so were saying it's totally fine if it's a private event. So it was like night and day. And the bottom line is they were interviewing all the churches, asking them negative questions. How news people are. They want to create controversy when there is none. And the churches, of course, said, "No, we're against this. We're going to boycott them," because they're told it in such a negative way that all the churches got together. And then of course, I was down there with the water park, talking to them about all this, what's happening, and they interviewed them on TV. It's also on the shows at closefree.com. If you watch it, it's of course free. It's in the blog. You can watch these videos, and so basically by the fourth day, because there was another day of it being number one story again. By the fourth day, they called me from the water park and they said, "We're going to have to cancel because we're getting too much negative reaction from all the churches, and they're going to cancel all their events." And I said, "Oh, darn it. Okay, well, I have to give thousands of dollars for the refunds." And they said they feel so depressed about it. They were trying to keep it a secret. I said, "Well, I definitely had to advertise it to sell ticket. But at the same time, that got it out to the media, but I didn't know the media would eat it up so much. It's so hard to get the media to ever mention my name. But then it's overkill. And so then the next story was number one story everywhere that the event is canceled, and which also hurts a lot of the local um, businesses like hotels and restaurants where people would spend money that we're going to visit.
Well, and the other thing is they might have made more money off this and future events than they would have from, Ma and Pa's church down the road,
Yeah, I know, but the churches do it, all the time, and they just didn't want the negative publicity. Their goal was to have it be a quiet event that hardly anyone knows about, but that's pretty hard to do.
Well, sure, because it's out of the norm. It's unique. Now, did anybody come out to support it? Did any groups?
Oh yeah, well, there were people writing letters to the editor of the Fresno Bee. A copy of those are also online in the same blog, and they're just talking away. Plus, there's a letter from a pastor that was all for it, and with permission, he let me post his letter on there, but I withheld his name. But he says he's a pastor and he believes that, in the part of the Bible where God said naked and unashamed and so on.
British Naturism started renting an indoor water park in 2006, 2 years after you tried to do this event.
Yeah.
They've been successfully doing it ever since. Why do you think they didn't encounter the same resistance?
Well, it's in Britain. There's not as many churches, I guess. I don't know, or the media maybe isn't as um, wild over there to try to twist it into a negative story. But many other water parks saw this and called me and they said, we'd love to have you do it at our place. Well, but they were too far away and I couldn't really financially, do it that far away, like 3,000 miles away. And so
What were some that reached out? When you say 3,000, like in what direction?
in
I'm just
Florida,
totally curious. Oh my God. Oh, all
yeah,
right.
and also from other parts of the world too.
Well, you would think in Florida, that's pretty close to Anner headquarters. You think they'd jump all over that?
Oh yeah. Well, no, I'm saying in Florida they wanted me to come out there and do it at their water park.
Right, and I'm saying
Yeah.
if you weren't able to, I'm surprised somebody else didn't step up.
Oh yeah, I agree with that.
Interesting, because I worked with the guys over at the Clothing Optional Home Network, and we looked extensively about trying to do something like this for Las Vegas, and it was just devastating. What a disappointment it was. Vegas gets behind swinger events and strippers and hookers and anything sexual, but here we are trying to do a non-sexual weekend of events, and it was just pulling teeth.
I've noticed that too in Vegas. I've tried to do events out there, and they want it to be all sexual or not at all.
Yeah.
I don't mean not at all, but clothes.
Right. No, we had a meeting with MGM Signatory, and the lady there was like, we had told them ahead of time, it's a nudist event, and then we show up to officially make the contract, and the head person says, "I understand some of your women may be topless." And I was so angry, I could have threw something out the window. I couldn't believe, like, they thought it was negotiable whether or not people were naked. It's a nudist event. That's the whole point. Now, are you interested in doing something again like this water park situation?
I'm always interested. It's as long as I can financially pull it off. I need a few people to work with me on it, and I'm open. you know. But the water park has to be at a place where it can be secluded. What's nice about Wild Water Adventures, they just had to block off a few fences and no one could see in.
Now
And it's
that
perfect.
that was back in 2004, and crikey, man, we're in 2020. Have there ever been any follow-up conversations? Have you went back maybe with a different team, you know?
Um, I have not, but it's Fresno and hasn't changed too much. But you never know.
And that's unfortunate, that so much effort could be put into something and it could be ruined by a few busybodies or some very loud or a very loud minority of people. And it's unfortunate that Corky hasn't had the opportunity to try it again. But it does work. It does work very, very well out on the other side of the Atlantic from me in the UK. British Naturism, which has been quite successful for many years, doing all kinds of things, has been renting a very large water park for, I think, about 25 years. In fact, they rent several now. And it's a very successful event. And so I got together with Mark Bass, who is currently the president of British Naturism, to hear all about it. So welcome to the show. So Mark, you are the president of British Naturism, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And thank you for inviting me to come along.
Oh, my pleasure. And how long have you been president?
So I've been president for coming up to 2 years. Before that, I was vice chair for a while, so a year and a half. So about 3 years in total.
Well, what we're talking about today, as you know, is the renting of not just pools, but entire water park. And that's something that British Naturism has been doing for a number of years. Isn't that right?
Very much so. So we're actually talking about going back decades. So we've got relationships with water parks that are going back 25 years. And so it's not a particularly new phenomena in this country. And that sort of continued relationship it does become increasingly important. So particularly in the challenging times where, as we already said, the leisure industry might be facing difficulties, the fact that we are a well-known and valued customer actually carries a lot of weight, because it means that we are supporting those venues in the same time that they are hosting us.
So it goes back a fair bit of time, but do you know how it got started?
So the oldest relationship was started out of clubs approaching particular venues. So one of our water park swims at Waterworld in Stoke, British Naturism has been running it for 5 or 6 years, something like that. But before that, it was run by a club, so we were Naturists, and so they were running it for quite a few years. And I think there were connections even before that, although I don't have the history because we're now going back a couple of decades. So it's tended to start, as most Naturism did, at the club level, which has then grown as the organisations and the federations have grown, so that it's really expanded over time.
So why didn't that continue at the club level? Why did British Naturism take that over?
So one of the big obstacles that we always face with water parks is simply the cost. For exclusive use of a water park, it is expensive, and there's never going to be any getting away from that. So at a time when they were struggling to bring in the numbers to make it financially viable, they concluded that maybe we're going to have to let this go. But they approached British Naturism, and of course, as a national organisation, the Federation does have a better advertising structure, a better marketing capacity. So British Naturism could take it over and keep it going and get the numbers through the door that were needed to make it financially viable. So the decision was largely financially driven.
So you talking about numbers. Can you put some numbers? What does it cost, and what do you need? How many people do you need to make it work?
So typically for a water park, you're going to need 200, more likely 300 people to make it break even. Because normally a water park is running at a capacity of around 2,500 people. So that's a lot of people. So if we're talking about a small swim, that's clearly not in the same ballpark. So we're talking thousands of pounds to hire the venue, and we've got to pay that up front as the going rate for exclusive use, and then it's then down on the organisation, so whether it's the federation or the club, to make sure that they get enough people come to the swim to recoup that investment.
So just for everybody who's listening, £1 as in February of 2021, when we're recording this, is about $1.75 Canadian and $1.40 American. So even bigger numbers in those currencies. But obviously, it had to be a success or you wouldn't have kept doing it. So what kind of numbers were you getting?
So we typically get around 300 a time at these things. Sometimes we'll get an improved attendance, but of course other times we don't quite miss the target. So you do need to be realistic and think about the long-term plan and just try to hit an average income that's going to make it financially viable over time. But we are generally hitting that 300 mark.
And it's just a one-day event, is that correct?
Yes. Generally, the water parks, of course, because of cost, they tend to be hired out, so usually for a number of hours rather than the full day. And I think there's certainly an aspect here when we're thinking about this sort of the costs involved, because if a water park is planning to be closed in an evening, it's a lot easier for them to give us a price which is feasible, because we're not competing with their peak hours. So they're still not antisocial hours, but we're not trying to compete with their peak income. So that means you can hire the venues exclusively for a feasible cost, and still get a number of hours which justifies people travelling a reasonable distance to attend.
So when you talk about a water park, of course, people may not have or may have different ideas about what that means. What kind of amenities do you have available to you when you rent one of those places?
So if I was describing a water park, I would use the defining characteristic as it's got slides. So we're talking the big water parks that will have a number of flumes and these sort of things. So of course, in addition to the pool, what they'll usually have sort of the various supporting structures, so the cafeterias, the bars, these sort of things. And we would normally have these facilities open, because some of the people that will come to a water park event will want to be riding around on the flumes all evening. Other people don't want to do that. They want to have a bit of a chat. They want to have some time out. So making sure that you've got the facilities, have the cafe open, make sure people can sit down and have a chat with a cup of tea becomes very important. So we'll always have all of those things going on at the same time.
And, people thinking of British weather, these places are indoors, right?
For the most part, a number of the water parks do have outdoor sections, and because the water's heated, it's actually wonderful to be able to sit outside in the cold air, in the warm water in the evening. That's a wonderful experience. But yes, most of the water parks are indoors.
Yeah, it's something that, strangely enough, in Canada, where it's even colder, we don't have as many as Britain seems to, which is something we're missing out on, I think. So you've had some challenges, though, recently, and some press which has not been favorable. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So there's always the problem that naturism faces, in that we can be misunderstood. So if you end up with locals jumping to a false conclusion that maybe there's something inappropriate going on, and maybe this is some sort of sexual activity, then of course you end up with rumours and gossip being spread, and that can end up putting pressure both on the venue and also on the people attending a swim to just stop the swim. So I think this is a problem that naturism faces throughout, and it's why clubs very often have tended to sort of being fairly discreet about revealing too much about their location or their membership. So really what we need to be achieving over time is just to improve the education. We know that naturism is healthy, it's respectable, and we never see any adverse events happening at a naturist swim. So it's just getting that message out. I'm trying to convince the public that actually there's not a problem here, because we know there isn't.
A similar event, an issue happened in Calgary here in Canada a few years ago, and it was a religious group that was fairly known for taking extreme positions that decided to protest and picket the event. Despite being a small group, it caused the people in charge to be concerned that perhaps it was a bigger issue, and so they reacted and probably overreacted, but eventually were convinced that it was just a small fringe issue and that most people didn't seem to have to care that much. Is that the way it is in the UK, or do you think there is a larger concern?
No, that's very, very much our experience. It's a very small number of people making an awful lot of noise, and so it sounds like it's a much bigger issue than it is. Because actually, if you start to talk to people in the area and in the street, most people don't have a problem with it. But if you've got a very small number of people making an awful lot of noise, it can feel so, particularly to a venue, that maybe there's more pressure on them, because of course as a venue, so particularly if you're looking at a large venue such as a water park, they don't really want to have adverse publicity. So a lot of noise from a small number of people makes it feel quite serious, because they start to worry about potentially losing custom. In practice, they don't seem to lose custom, because we're talking about a minority here, and as you say, it tends to be the extreme minority that want to make a lot of noise. And it's not necessarily about naturism. Usually it's just groups of people wanting to make a fuss about something. So that's why the communication approaches are so important, to make sure that we're continuing to engage with the locals and with the venues, and just keep it all in perspective.
So we have folks listening to this all over the world, and if people want to do this where they are, you are the most successful. So what would your advice be?
I think the most important, the key hurdle with trying to start something like this is getting a venue on board. And of course, we as people are all slightly risk averse. So if a naturist is approaching a venue, the immediate reaction is what's going to happen? Is there going to be a problem here? So really the trick that as we found is to make sure that firstly we're completely open, we're completely honest, but also that we look credible, that we look professional. So this is the advantage of working as a federation rather than an individual club. We can go in there with a high level of professionalism, and a venue can immediately see that we are not a small group of weirdos. We're a large group of respectable individuals with good pedigree, and it doesn't take very long for the venue to think, okay, yes, there isn't a risk here. So that sort of professionalism and care in the approach becomes crucial. And I think, harking back to the point that we just discussed about the potential for protest, making sure that our paperwork is in place. So we have an extremely rigorous safeguarding policy, and it's actually being passed around as an exemplar for good safeguarding practice in caring for children and vulnerable adults. And so if we can go to a venue and actually present a very well thought out risk assessment, so we're recognizing what the possible problems are and we have a way to deal with them, that immediately washes away the concerns that a venue might have. And so once the venue is no longer concerned about negative effects, it all comes down to the money. So if we are prepared to pay the price, there's no negative, it's a very easy decision now for the venue to make.
And what about in terms of how you run an event like that and promote it? Any suggestions?
So I guess as part of our safeguarding approach, we do make sure that we have recognisable and responsible people attending our events. So we'll always have a number of stewards and safeguarding officers, and so they're going to be badged so that people can recognise them. And so partly this is in case God forbid something goes wrong, not that it ever does. But more importantly, actually having those recognising people there that are badged up makes it very easy for new folk to recognise them and think, yes, this is being run securely, and I know who I would go to if I needed help. So on the day, that sort of just visible presence is important. I think in terms of the marketing, so clearly being able to advertise and sell these big events is a big attraction. We want to draw people into naturism, and it's one thing to say to people oh, you should give naturism a try. It's good fun. But if they don't actually have an opportunity, that it's largely worthless. So actually having these sort of big events is a way for people that are thinking, maybe I want to give this a go, to take that opportunity. So being able to advertise. So we essentially advertise through our website and our forum rather than sort of taking out adverts in newspapers, because that means that we're targeting people that might be interested in naturism. But being able to be public with that really does draw people in.
Of course, it's a double-edged sword. As you are public and you get media attention, that also gets the protest, I would guess.
That is the risk, and that is the balance that we need to find. So it's something we continually have to review. And so you've touched on the press there, because, of course, the press can be your greatest ally, but also your greatest enemy. Mm-hmm. And we certainly want to be promoting and we want to be normalising naturism, and that means we talk to the press. And it's always wonderful to get good stories in the press. But, of course, it's very easy for the press to run a story just to spark a little bit of controversy because it draws attention to their newspaper or their media site. So it's finding that balance and trying to make sure that we are putting out a clear, transparent message so that it's not misunderstood too frequently, although, as we've both found, it can be misunderstood sometimes, and then it's possible that we need to be taking a slightly more circumspect approach whilst we re-establish the situation and everything calms down.
So have you found it to be a good source of getting folks involved in naturism, new people recruited in trying it for the first time?
Very much so. It won't surprise you that this is something that we discuss an awful lot about. Why do people join a national federation? And this is opinion-based to a large extent, but it seems to be the events that draw people in. It's the philosophy and the wish to continue naturism that keeps people around. So they come in for the events, they stay for the campaigning is perhaps a simple way of looking at it. So certainly we will see people will join British Naturism specifically go to an event. So most of our events are open to naturists that are not members of British Naturism, but there's a significant price difference between a member and a non-member. So there's an incentive there for an individual that wants to go to a big event to join the organisation. And once they're in the organisation, they tend to stick around. So it's a great way of getting people through the door for that first experience. And this is very much what we're thinking about as we're trying to recruit people. That low effort first experience so that people can try naturism, find out that it's great, it's good fun, it's relaxing, and they're being respected there. And then they will stay around.
So even here in Canada, we've had, we've certainly had lots of people renting pools. Renting pools is something that goes back, way back. In fact, the first real naturist event in the United States was a pool rental, I believe, in New York City. I'd have to look that up. But it was... people have been renting pools in the winter before people could afford to buy land. They were renting gyms and pools. Part of the advantage is that they're enclosed and nobody would see what's going on. You can control access. But even recently in Toronto, for a few decades now, people have been renting pools. They do so in Montreal. And they've been doing it in Calgary, and one particular group got started, Calgary Nude Recreation, more recently, and had quite a bit of success, which resulted in press and the same kind of story you heard from the other two happened in Calgary as well. Here's Jeff and Matt to tell us that story. So, Jeff and Matt from the Calgary Nude Recreation Group, it's lovely to have you on. I'm curious about how you start. So you're going to rent a pool that costs money.
Yeah, we had to find a pool that was suitable. So there's 4 wave pools in Calgary. One would not rent to us at all, but that was a private pool. So I looked at the other 3 public pools that are run by the city. The first 2, because of the windows, were not practical. And the last one has some windows to cover. It's a bit of a complication, but it's doable. So I walked in there in person to talk to them, and they seemed keen on the idea. That was pretty easy. I had to get insurance sorted out, build a website, begin promotions. It wasn't that hard.
Okay, so you find a place and you want to do it, and then what did you do? Stand on the street and ask people to come in and get naked?
Well, we made a website for sure. I shared the event in different areas on the internet that I thought would be receptive, like the local Burning Man crowd. But that's ultimately what led to the media finding out about it.
Well, I was going to say, I think specifically to kind of walk people through it a little bit, CNR had started in the fall. It had held an event successfully. It had announced the wave pool swims in January, February, March. There were about 100 RSVPs. At that time, it was kind of managed through meetup.com, and I believe there was a Facebook event as well. There was something like 100 RSVPs on January the 3rd. On that day, a popular social media account picked it up, posted it on Calgary's Reddit, which I don't know, at the time probably had 60 or 70,000 subscribers, maybe a little bit less than that. Kind of went viral there. Everyone was talking about it. It was new. It was different. It was, haha, people are getting naked. No one really seemed to do anything or seemed to care about it from there. From there, though, the local media had picked it up. It was a cover story. The fact that the event was simply happening, that there was going to be a naked swim at the leisure center, was a front page cover story on Metro on January 5th. The coverage that popped up around that time, I found really balanced. It was respectful. There was punny. There was cliche headlines. There was bear jokes. There's stuff like that, but they had the regional manager of recreation for the city provided a really great quote about how the city just loves to be accommodating of everyone. They get bookings from a variety of diverse groups. They don't consider people who want to swim nude to be any different than someone of a religious sect that wants to be able to swim in clothes. They were very, I think, progressive and enlightened about it, which was really nice to see. Over that weekend, though, there was a change.org petition that popped up. Basically the crux of it was it was sort of, we want it canceled, but if it's not canceled, it can only proceed if it's made 18 plus. And that got to 24,888 supporters of that petition kind of by the end of everything.
I want to throw in another little detail about that too, how the media attention that CNR got. We got a lot of attention then, and we did not have the protocols in place to process all those registrants. So just even if there was no backlash against that event, CNR grew too fast for me to handle in that 1 month period anyways. So there's a bunch of reasons why all of that was not helpful. There was a lot of concessions that were made to have that swim in February because there's a lot of concerns bouncing around the city. So I had one city manager that I interfaced with, and he came to me with concerns. And this is a situation where I think compromise is incredibly valid. We hear on the internet, people arguing, nudists shouldn't have to do this and nudists shouldn't have to do that. And it's like, well, I kind of agree with that a little bit. But if making compromises is what lets us gain ground, then I think they're fair. So one of the compromises was because we allowed children at the event, it was asked if we could check birth certificates to make sure that parents are bringing their own kids. And everybody agrees, even the guy presenting this to me agreed that this was ridiculous. But what it did was it allowed the city to go back to the people that were trying to keep our event canceled and say, no, your concern is not a problem because of these reasons. Like I said, everybody at the pool that I spoke to was super supportive of what I was trying to put together with CNR, and even didn't think that the swim should be canceled after the city canceled it.
So all of these pool stories have one thing in common, which is public outrage. Public outrage, though, from a minority. And it's very unfortunate because a few very loud, very pushy people, who don't have to participate and who are not affected because the people who go to the swims are all willing participants. And of course, there's this false narrative that somehow it's going to attract pedophiles, which of course that makes no sense if you really think about it, because why would they go to a place with lots of people watching them and keeping things in control? So it's kind of crazy, but it happens, and it happens over and over and over again. And the problem when we rent facilities is it's hard for the people who run them, the owners, the politicians, to differentiate between what's going to be a big problem and what is not. If it seems really loud and it's a little scary, well, what do they have to lose by saying no? Just a small rental in most cases. So we have to be very firm. We have to convince them. We have to tell the stories. We have to share. And we have to appeal to their sense of fairness, because the cities do support other people with special interests. I mean, how many of you have a park near you that has a tennis court? I don't play tennis, and I know that I don't know if a majority of the population doesn't play tennis, but it's not a large proportion, I don't think, that plays tennis. But it's good for people who like to play tennis. There are tennis courts. And so similarly for naturists, there should be time for naturist swims. And in Europe, it's not at all uncommon in most of the major Western Europe countries that you have naturist swims. And as you heard in the UK, renting water parks even. So hopefully that is inspiration, these three different stories for people out there who don't have a swim to go to in their areas. And maybe they can start, maybe you can get something going in your area or get involved with a group and help them. So that's all for this episode of the Naturist Living Show. And thank you as always for listening. Again, my name is Stéphane Deschênes. I'm your host for the podcast and the owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. And I make the show with lots of help from Samantha Graham, who makes this so much more pleasant and easy because she does all the hard work of editing and keeping things organized for us. So thank you, Samantha, and thank you for supporting us through Patreon. If you are not supporting us, please take a moment and go to patreon.com/Naturist Living Show. Just one word. None of that money goes to me. It's all to support Samantha and the show and keep it going. And even if you don't, you can still listen for free because we want to get the word out. We want to keep this going. But we really appreciate the support of the folks that are doing this. You can find links to all of the items I mentioned in the show notes on the website at naturistlivingshow.com. And also, please keep sending your comments and suggestions. I really appreciate getting them. We read them all. I read them all. Don't always have time to respond to everyone. But it keeps us going to hear the feedback and the support that we get. The show's email address is contact@naturistlivingshow.com. It's also on the website. I hope you enjoyed the show and that you'll join us again for the next episode of the Naturist Living Show.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bearoaks.ca.
Recording. Now I unpaused it. I believe we're recording, and he wanted me to do it in split stereo, so I got it in split stereo. I think we're good. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna I'll pull up his questions and do a little intro, and then we will dive right in.
Okay. So it's not recording yet.
It is recording, but he's not. You know,
Okay.
he doesn't have to use everything that's being recorded.
Right. Okay. No problem.
Do you need me to pause it? Do you need to say anything you don't want him to hear?
Oh no, it's all good.
Do you want to talk about what a big dick Stefan Duchesne is, and he'll never know you said it? The biggest dick we know, just the worst. All right.
I'll save that for later. No,
Okay.
I'm just kidding. I've always admired him. I've never had the pleasure of meeting him yet.
Oh yeah, he's a really good guy. He's a really good guy.